Hey class, it's Wednesday and it's time for your midweek check-in. Happy almost Halloween. Hope you all are able to spend a little bit of time, like I said, one day a week away and doing some things for yourself. Um, but I also hope that you're getting into your rhythm and spending the majority of your time really wisely. I do see that we're getting up right up to speed on the discussion boards and also making time for the project work. So I'm really happy to see that. Um, One of the things that I think makes this class very difficult is the volume of reading. It's already hard for many students to take a humanities type class that involves a lot of reading, and then when you truncate it, or not truncate, that's the wrong word, when you shorten and condense it the way that this is, it can get very challenging to just process that amount of material quickly. And so I wanted to give you a couple of tips about how I read and things that I think will help you. So I have a physical copy of my old copy of The Unhappy Marriage of Marxism and Feminism by Heidi Hartman. And I wanted to just show you some of the things that you might not think of about this essay. When I go to read an essay, the first thing that I do is look at how it's constructed. So I don't necessarily just dive right in and start reading line for line. I look at what do the sections look like? What is the introduction? Okay, so you have the introduction and then you have here one, Marxism and the woman question. Well, I like to keep going through there so that I have some idea of what the sections will be, how long they are, what the transitions are. Okay, we then have the next section, Towards More Useful Feminism. And keep in mind, once you have sort of a 20,000 foot view of the article, you don't always have to read it exactly in the order that it was written. One way that can be really helpful is for students to read the introduction, then the conclusion, then go back to some of the middle parts. Another thing that helps is maybe reading it out of order. Just keeps you a little bit awake and alert. Definitely also do all the things that you've heard of before, okay, highlight, read twice. But I don't want students to get into this kind of rut where you sit down and you try to just read every word start to finish, and you just kind of start to get lost and you can't really see the end. When you look at an essay at the structural level, it gives you a little bit more of that long view, and you know that there are only and you know how many sections are composed of. Now, if anything, you can also use the internal structure of a section to help you. Okay, so the most important parts are, and the statements of what that will carry you through the essay are going to be at the beginning and the end, right? So just in the same way that you would write an essay that would have an introduction and a conclusion, each of these segments also has an introduction and conclusion. In the middle, there's some evidence. You should be able to, in almost anyone's work, especially something like this, read the first line of every paragraph and get a pretty good idea of what the overall trajectory is. So I want you to think about ways that you can read wisely, not just kind of slogging through the whole thing in order, but smarter ways to think about it, ways to go back to certain sections that seem more important a couple of times, and maybe do a quick skim over some of the sections that aren't as important or as critical to the overall argument. So please start thinking a little bit about that. I know that there's a big volume of readings to get through every week, and particularly until you get to the discussion questions. But play around with it a little bit. It might be that you'll find that reading the discussion questions first helps direct your reading, and helps you figure out what types of things you're supposed to be looking for. One of the things that I do with the discussion questions is I try to cover just about every reading, or make it possible for you to cover every reading in your answers. So you might want to think about how I am distributing the articles throughout the discussion questions, and that can help you plan your answer. Now, that's the main thing that I want us to be working towards this week, is that those reading strategies, that reading comprehension. Shorter pieces tend to be easier, but they also can start to get mixed up. So the other thing that I recommend is taking notes and having something that, where you quickly, in your own words, it can really be just one sentence. You articulate the main idea of an essay in relation. So, for example, goodbye to all that, right? In one sentence, write for yourself what the main idea is. Do the same for goodbye to all that 3. And then that way you don't get so lost in the details. You can fill them in as you come, but we're staying focused on building that larger conceptual map. The other big news for this week is that the midterm is posted. I'm going to try and minimize my my floating head so that I can show you show you where it is and what we're working with. I hope that by now the course navigation has gotten easier for you, or seems more second nature, right? When you go to click on 225-500, Women in Social Action, click on the class, it pulls you up to the news feed, and you'll have, and remember, you'll have the checklists, you'll have any announcements throughout, you'll have the midweek check-ins all here. The midterm is posted under content, and this is and content assignments is where you'll find a lot of our project work. Okay, so we have over here, you can see, I should point out, overview. You'll find a copy of the syllabus. You should be referring to this every week for your readings, and then also anytime you have a question about how you're being graded, how you're being evaluated, what the expectations are, this is where you should go first. So that's under overview. Next, we have the table of contents. We have the readings. So week 1, I start off with the overview, and then I have all of the readings and lecture files. Week 2, once again, here we have the week 2 checklist, and then you have all of the readings and the files. Now, most of the time, you'll be directed over here through the checklist, which will be posted on the news feed. But it's good to know how to navigate these things, both through the news feed, through the links that I provide, and as well as on your own. The assignments tab is then located down here, and this is where all your project work will be. So you have the YouTube video signups, the discussion post rubrics. You have a whole experimenting with activism section, and then down here you have the news media reports. I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes of this check-in going over your news media report. And this is a new assignment this year that I think is particularly important in the media environment that we're living in now, that is so polarized, that is so mistrusted, that is under attack from the right, but also I think suffering crisis in confidence in general. So the information that's available from news media sources really does determine our access to knowledge about current events, and therefore our ability to participate fully in the political process. In my opinion, the stakes are very, very high. Full and free access to information is a really important component of a just and fair society. And so for your midterm essay, I want you to choose a media outlet and analyze it for the quality of its coverage on women's issues. And so there are some guidelines here about how I want you to approach that, but the most important thing is that this really is your opportunity to speak your mind. okay, to make an argument that someone else who is watching the same thing might disagree with, and carry it through and provide evidence. And you can really choose a variety. You can do this topic a number of ways. You can pick something that you love, that you want to exonerate. You can pick something that you hate, that you think is terrible, or you can pick something that you don't particularly have any stakes in. I think we're always going to go in with an opinion. It's really important to have observations and evidence and to listen to the data a little bit, and check your preconceived notions. But ultimately, this is your project and I want you to have some ownership over it. And I don't want you to be afraid to say, you know what, this news media outlet is really, really bad for women. It doesn't contain enough information, and when it does, it's inaccurate. You know, don't feel bad saying something like that. And so at a basic level, you're going to read or view kind of a sample of your outlet's coverage and think about, first of all, its medium. Okay, is it television, print, or online? What difference does that make? And what's its history, right? When did Fox News come on the scene as a national newscaster? Then describe the overall political slant, okay, left, right, or center. You know, if you just looking up at this list, you could see The Atlantic is a fairly left-leaning magazine. Breitbart News is a very right-leaning online news outlet. And then there are some that are sort of in the middle. The Denver Post might be kind of centrist. CNN's another good example of something we normally think of as centrist. And how do you know? What is your evidence? Okay, assess the level of information provided to the public and the depth of coverage. We have a lot of very loud people competing for our attention, as we discussed when we talked about the YouTube video. And it's important that we not lose sight of the quality of information that we are being provided, and that we continue to seek that out. So think about what topics or issues are addressed frequently, and how frequent is coverage of women's issues. And another thing to think about too is how well represented are women reporters, because if you don't have women's voices, and your editorial team is made up of all men, how likely are you to do a good job speaking about women's issues? Compose your thoughts into a well-structured essay. Every essay has a thesis statement. In this case, your thesis statement will make an argument about your outlet's quality as a source for women's news on women's issues. You'll then conclude by summarizing your evaluation of the outlet and restating your argument. Okay, so introduction, conclusion. In the middle, each paragraph should once again contain an introductory and concluding sentence that speak to the main idea of the paragraph. And then each paragraph should contain some context, evidence, and discussion. It's due Saturday, November 11th by 8 p.m. in Dropbox. I have opened that Dropbox, 3 to 4 pages. Use a reasonable font, so Times New Roman is a good one. There are some that are really crazy and that are difficult to read. And I think in college in general, you want to go with something that is going to generally be acceptable to everybody. It's a medium of communication, so pick something easy to read, Times New Roman, maybe Arial, and pick something that is not going to cause lots of problems. In the same way, don't mess too much with the margins. Just give me double-spaced, 12-point, reasonable font, 1-inch margins. That's the standard, and number your pages. Citations are once again any style, but be consistent. Please do look over this in your own time and let me know if you have questions. I'm always available for help. I'm always available to look at drafts.